Harold watched his wife Margaret turn away in bed for the third night this week, and he knew their 45-year marriage was quietly dying. Have you ever felt your relationship slipping away? Not from screaming fights or bitter arguments, but from something far more heartbreaking? The slow, silent erosion of connection. The gradual acceptance that passion, playfulness, and intimacy are just memories now. Things that happen to other people, but never to you again. At 72, Harold had convinced himself this was simply life. The morning stiffness that kept him from reaching for his wife. The constant fatigue that made every conversation feel like work. The loss of that spark that once made Margaret's eyes light up when he walked into a room. But what if I told you the solution wasn't therapy, expensive treatments, or accepting defeat? What if the answer was sitting in your local grocery store? A simple fruit that ancient civilizations called the secret of the gods? If you ever wonder whether it's possible to reclaim lost vitality after 70, hit that like button and let me know in the comments whether you believe our bodies can truly heal themselves. Because Harold's story is about to change everything you think you know about aging. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., Harold would shuffle to the kitchen for his coffee. The same blue mug, the same 2 sugars, the same quiet acceptance of another day that felt exactly like yesterday. Margaret would still be in bed, not from laziness, but because their rhythms had slowly drifted apart over the years. Where they once shared morning conversations over breakfast, now Harold read his newspaper alone on the porch, listening to the distant sounds of his wife starting her own separate routine. By evening, they'd settle into their respective chairs, his recliner, her spot on the sofa, watching television programs they didn't really care about. The space between them felt like an ocean, even though they sat just 3 feet apart. Harold's body had become a catalog of complaints. His knees protested every staircase. His back ached from sleeping of all things. Simple tasks like opening jars or reaching high shelves required planning and patience. But it was the invisible symptoms that hurt most. The fatigue that made him feel like he was moving through thick fog, the mental cloudiness that made conversations feel like climbing mountains. Margaret never complained, but Harold caught her glances. The way she'd look at their old photo albums sometimes, her finger tracing over pictures of them hiking, dancing, laughing until their stomachs hurt. He'd see her watching other couples at the grocery store. Couples who still held hands, who still leaned into each other while deciding between cereals. She missed their Sunday walks through the neighborhood. She missed the way Harold used to surprise her with small gestures, a cup of tea brought to her garden, a silly joke whispered during serious moments. Most of all, she missed feeling connected to the man she'd loved for nearly half a century. They both assumed this was simply what happened. Time wins. Bodies fail. Marriages survive, but they don't thrive. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this story, because what happened next challenges everything we've been told about inevitable aging. But here's what Harold didn't know. His body wasn't broken. It was just starving. Dr. Peterson had been Harold's physician for 15 years, so the routine checkup should have been predictable. Blood pressure check, weight discussion, maybe adjustments to his arthritis medication. Instead, Dr. Peterson sat down a prescription pad and asked an unusual question. Harold, when's the last time you felt truly energetic? Not just okay or managing, but genuinely vibrant. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Doc, I'm 72. Vibrant isn't really on the menu anymore. Dr. Peterson leaned forward. What if I told you that wasn't necessarily true? Instead of reaching for his prescription pad, Dr. Peterson opened his laptop and showed Harold something unexpected. Research studies, ancient texts, historical accounts, all focused on one remarkable fruit, pomegranate. Dr. Peterson said, every culture that lived long, healthy lives seem to know something about this fruit that we've forgotten. Harold squinted at the screen. The ruby red seeds did look almost jewel-like, but this felt like something his grandmother might have suggested, not a medical doctor. Ancient Persian texts called it the fruit of vitality. Egyptian pharaohs were buried with pomegranate seeds for the afterlife. Traditional Chinese medicine has used it for over 2,000 years to restore what they called life force. Dr. Peterson pulled up modern research. But here's what science tells us now. Pomegranates contain some of the highest concentrations of antioxidants found in nature. Specifically, compounds called polyphenol that can actually improve blood circulation, reduce inflammation, and support cellular energy production. Harold felt skeptical. So you're telling me to eat fruit instead of taking medicine? I'm telling you to try something that's been working for thousands of years before we convince ourselves that only pills could heal us. Give it 6 weeks. A small glass of pomegranate juice each morning, a handful of seeds in the evening. That's it. Harold thought about Margaret's gentle glances, about the photo album she looked through when she thought he wasn't watching, about all the conversations they weren't having and all the connections they weren't making. "What do I have to lose?" he asked. Dr. Peterson smiled. "Exactly. But Harold, be patient. Real healing doesn't happen overnight. Your body needs time to remember what vitality feels like." Week 1 felt like an exercise in hope disguised as fruit consumption. Harold dutifully drank his pomegranate juice with breakfast, though it tasted more tart than he expected. Margaret watched with curious eyes as he sprinkled the ruby seeds over his evening yogurt. "Trying to live forever?" she teased gently. "Trying to live better," Harold replied, and something in his tone made Margaret study his face more carefully. By week 2, Harold noticed the smallest shift. Not energy exactly, but less of that heavy fog that usually settled over him by afternoon. He found himself staying awake during their evening programs instead of dozing in his chair. Margaret noticed too, though she didn't say anything yet. Week 3 brought the first real surprise. Harold woke up on a Tuesday morning and realized his knees didn't ache. Not significantly less pain, no pain. He stood up from bed, without the usual groaning negotiation with his joints, without the careful calculation of how much discomfort each movement would cost him. "Margaret," he called from the bedroom. "Come here." She appeared in the doorway, concern flickering across her face. Harold bent down and touched his toes, something he hadn't done in 3 years. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Harold." But it was week 4 when the real transformation began. Harold was reading the newspaper on the porch when he realized something extraordinary. He was actually comprehending what he read. The mental cloudiness that had become so familiar he'd stopped noticing it was lifting like morning mist. He found himself having opinions again, wanted to discuss articles with Margaret instead of just passively consuming information. That evening, for the first time in months, Harold initiated conversation. "Did you see the story about the community garden project?" he asked, and Margaret looked up from her book with genuine surprise and delight. They talked for an hour. Week 5 changed everything. Harold woke up on a Saturday morning and felt something he'd almost forgotten existed, actual desire to do something. Not obligation or routine, but genuine enthusiasm. He wanted to go for a walk. More than that, he wanted to ask Margaret to come with him. "Would you like to take a walk around the block?" he asked over breakfast. Margaret's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. "Really? Really?" They walked slowly at first, Harold testing his new reality. Joints that moved smoothly, energy that sustained him, breath that came easily. But gradually, their pace quickened. They found themselves stopping to admire neighbors' gardens, commenting on renovations, laughing at a particularly dramatic squirrel defending its bird feeder territory. Drop a heart in the comments if this story gives you hope for your own relationship, because what happened next surprised Harold most of all. That night, as they were getting ready for bed, Harold reached for Margaret's hand, not out of habit or duty, but because he genuinely wanted to touch her. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, not sadness, but recognition. Her husband was coming back to her. But Harold's transformation wasn't just about the fruit. It was about remembering that his body had never stopped trying to heal itself. What Harold experienced wasn't magic. It was biology finally getting what it needed to function properly. Pomegranates contain over 100 phytochemicals, but the real powerhouses are compounds called punicalagins and anthocyanins. These antioxidants don't just fight damage. They actively support the mitochondria, the cellular powerhouses that produce energy. When your mitochondria function better, everything functions better. The improved circulation Harold experienced came from pomegranate's ability to increase nitric oxide production, which helps blood vessels relax and expand. Better circulation means more oxygen and nutrients reaching every part of your body, including your brain, explaining Harold's mental clarity. But here's what researchers are discovering about the connection between physical vitality and emotional intimacy. When you feel better in your body, you naturally become more present, more engaged, more willing to reach out and connect. Harold's renewed energy didn't just fix his joints, it fixed his relationship with life itself. And when someone falls back in love with living, everyone around them feels it. Within 2 months, Harold and Margaret had established new routines. Morning walks became sacred time for conversation. Harold started helping with dinner preparation again, something he'd abandoned when standing for long periods became uncomfortable. They began planning small adventures, day trips to farmers' markets, visits to museums they'd driven past for years. Margaret later told her sister, "It wasn't just that Harold got his energy back. He got his curiosity back, his sense of humor, his interest in me." The physical improvements were measurable. Harold's next checkup showed improved blood pressure, better cholesterol levels, and what Dr. Peterson called remarkably improved markers across the board. But the relationship improvements were transformational. Harold started sharing his experience with friends at the senior center. Within months, 3 other couples had begun their own pomegranate experiment. 2 reported similar improvements in energy and joint comfort. One couple, married 52 years, rediscovered dancing. The lesson wasn't just about one specific fruit. It was about the power of giving your body what it needs to remember how to thrive, rather than simply accepting decline as inevitable. Harold's transformation from resigned acceptance to renewed vitality took 6 weeks and cost less than his monthly medication copays. But the real change, the return of joy, intimacy, and partnership in his marriage, was priceless. Today, at 73, Harold still drinks his pomegranate juice every morning. But now Margaret joins him, and they've turned it into a ritual of gratitude for bodies that proved more resilient than they ever imagined. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from fighting our bodies, but from finally giving them what they've been asking for all along. Age doesn't have to mean decline. Relationships don't have to fade into comfortable distance. Sometimes, the secret to rediscover vitality is as simple as paying attention to what ancient wisdom has been trying to tell us for thousands of years. If Harold's story inspired you to believe that renewal is possible at any age, subscribe for more stories of seniors who refuse to accept aging as surrender. Comment below with your own experiences with natural remedies that change your life. I read every single comment, and your stories matter. And please, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to fall back in love with living. Because Harold and Margaret's journey proves that sometimes the secret to a long, vibrant life isn't found in a pharmacy. It's growing in an orchard, waiting for someone brave enough to take the first bite. What seemed impossible at 72 became Harold's new reality. A marriage restored, a body renewed, and a future full of possibility. The only question left is, are you ready to take your first bite?